Well, hey there, my name's Luke, and you're listening to the Good Folks Doing Good Work podcast, a podcast where I interview folks all throughout the coffee supply circle about the good they're trying to bring into the world and hopefully remind you to keep bringing good things into this world in your context. Let's get into this week's podcast. Well, today I have the privilege of chatting with Aaron Fender, who is the co-founder and CEO of Portrait Coffee, an Atlanta-based coffee company rooted in culture, community, and the belief that we can pour a new narrative in the world of coffee. Aaron was born in Florida, but grew up in Metro Atlanta, where he studied psychology before diving into specialty coffee. It was a formative visit to a coffee farm in Rwanda that reshaped how he saw the industry and deepened his commitment to building something more inclusive, relational, and joyful. What started as a crowd-funded dream powered by friends, family, and long conversations around a table has now grown into a West End gathering space where coffee is less about the cup and more about the connection it creates. He's a husband, a proud dad, and a committed student who always is learning, growing, and asking better questions. At the heart of it all, Aaron loves creating spaces where people feel seen, welcomed, and part of something bigger than themselves. All the way from Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to the Good Folks podcast, Aaron.
Thank you for having me. That was a very heartwarming intro. I appreciate it.
It's very true of you. Do you remember the last coffee you had that reminded you why you're in this business?
I did. And funny enough, I had it this week. We are working with a community producers in Sun, Colombia with our friends at Unblended Coffee. And I actually had the opportunity to visit them a few weeks ago. And it is a process of innovation where they're experimenting with creating a honey processed coffee. We've had it for about 2 months and we had it on drip at the cafe a couple days ago. And Marvin Duncan, our head roaster, I felt like he really dialed it in. It was like super sweet, really good acidity. It's kind of cool when like the whole thing comes together. So that was the last time.
Did it bring back any memories of being in Rwanda, or how did it connect with you?
Probably not directly Rwanda. I mean, I think it was, so when we were in Colombia, one of the producers, his name is Oscar, he gave us his lot of that honey processed coffee. So he gave us the green unroasted sample and then a roasted bag of it. So I thought back to tasting how his interpretation of that coffee and then tasting our interpretation of that coffee was just like a really cool, it was like putting two colors together. So yeah, it was pretty special.
Very cool. Very cool. You're drinking kind of an interesting varietal today. Is that correct?
Yes. We were talking about it before the call. It's I guess a branch of a Bourbon varietal via Sarchi. Both of us kind of did a quick little Google on it, but it's an anaerobically processed coffee, and it's taken me about 2 weeks to dial in. So it's kind of fun to test those muscles.
Hey, really quickly, I have 3 things I want to share with you. Number 1, I run a consulting firm called Pomelo Coffee Consulting, and I only work with coffee roasters, and I help them with 3 things: their people, their processes, and their profit. Now, within Pomelo, I also run a cohort for owners, and then there's a separate one for leaders that work for coffee roasters. Now, they're structured similarly. There's some learning opportunities, there's some reading opportunities, there's some hot seat sections, and I gotta tell you, it's been pretty amazing to see what's possible when a group of owners and leaders are sharing the things that they're facing, both the good things and the bad things, and providing some camaraderie and also a mirror to see that I'm not alone in this world, in this business, and there's people who are doing similar things, maybe have already done the things that I'm doing and that I'm facing. So if that sounds interesting to you and you want to find some other roasters and have some camaraderie with them, you can go to my website, pomelocoffeeconsulting.com, go to the Junto tab. There's a tab at the top of my website, and you can learn more and see if you're a good fit for that. Lastly, I wrote a book. It's called The Owner's Manual, A Guide to Sustaining a Coffee Roaster, and really it fleshes out the framework that I use when I work with clients, the core 7 that is. And if that's something that sounds interesting to you, you can go to my website. There's a tab at the top that says book, and you can snag yourself a copy. All right, back to the show. So one of the things that has most impressed me about your work is how you always seem to be in the news. You've been written up by national publications like ABC, NBC, you've been on Food Network, Food and Wine, Barista Mag, Daily Coffee News. How have you managed to stay in the news?
Great question. I love it. Always appreciate a good news story. So, kind of a tangent, but I met someone 6 months ago that runs a marketing agency, a very successful one here in Atlanta. And he told me the first person he ever hired was a PR person. And he said, like, that's literally how they built their agency. That's not the strategy we took at Portrait, but I mean, it was pretty interesting. Honestly, what we do at Portrait is like when we have a special campaign or project, we write a marketing and press kit. And I am just really intentional about sharing it with anyone who's previously written work about Portrait. I think back in like 2021 and 2022, there was a particular spotlight on Black-owned businesses. We did have just like a lot of organic press from then, but I believe in accountability. So a lot of the people, journalists who wrote those pieces, I just follow up with every like 3 to 6 months with like any sort of campaign we're doing. And if it resonates, like they will either forward it to someone else or write it up. So there is a bit of strategy behind it for sure.
Okay, so I want to touch on two things here. The first one I want to touch up on is you always write a press release for things that you're doing. So let's talk about that. What's included in it?
That's a great question. We kind of like took a smorgasbord approach, but it typically has like brand overview, like, hey, what is the project in 2 to 3 sentences? It has a link to a Google Drive with like all of our product photos. It has breakdown of like whatever the products are. It has a date when we're doing the actual press release. And then at the bottom, there's actual press release that's, I don't know, 5 paragraphs or something. And it's nothing too fancy. We kind of like recycle the same kind of format for different projects. But here in Atlanta, I mean, like what we try and do is reach out to our local journalists, our local papers first, and engage with them, and then kind of build from there. Because the reality is, like, we're an Atlanta rooted company. We want to make sure that we're talking to our community first.
Yeah, it's so good. The reason why I'm pressing in here is the concept can also often be that, oh, a press release, that sounds really intimidating. That's big, or I have to hire someone to do that. You don't. What you've listed out here is exactly what you need. You need a project overview, product photos, when's the thing happening, and a summary of the thing that's happening. And if you can copy that and repeat that for every initiative that you're doing, it's very, very repeatable. And so thanks for sharing that. I also learned this because I always was like, how do you get written up in a publication? How do you do that?
Yeah.
It's quite easy. You ask.
Yeah, you ask. I mean, any website, news website, they all have like a press section, and all you have to do is submit what we talked about, and you could just drop a Google Doc link and then you're done. Especially if you pick your spots appropriately. Like there's times where they're dying to have stories covered. So yeah, you're doing all of the work for them. And in some ways they're like, yes, we have something that's ready to go. And if you have photos and summary and an outline of your business already mapped out, it's pretty easy to produce that. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, let's talk about follow-up with press releases, because why is that important? Why is that important? I mean, I think if you're going to put in the work to build a business and tell a story, you might as well let people know about it. I think at times I can feel an allergy to press or marketing, but it's at the very nature of like the work that we're doing. So, and sometimes I'm thinking like, it's not just about myself or my team or the West End, but also even like our producing partners and highlighting the work they're doing and stuff. So it's kind of just like an honest, good faith effort to push as hard as you can. The reason why I was pushing in there is, one, yes, it's good faith. You need to be consistent, and it's your responsibility to grow the business and to push the business down the field. But sometimes things get lost in an inbox, and just a follow up every few months to remind people that you're still around will get you written up more than if you just send it and never respond to the folks after that. You didn't start out as a roasting company. You started out as a cafe, correct? Yes, we signed our lease February 2020, about 2 weeks before the pandemic. Oh, it's great timing. Yeah, great time. So then, were you still doing your build out through the first part of the pandemic, or was it turnkey when you got in? We definitely stopped and started the process, mostly due to construction costs. These are rough numbers, but let's say the project cost $100,000 like pre-COVID. It just about tripled by the
Yeah.
time we finished the project,
Right.
just due to everyone remembers like all the supply chain shortages we had with all sorts of materials and delays. And so we just got hit with all that. So I think there was probably 2 times during the pandemic where we like started and we were like, let's stop. Let's focus on what's working and we'll come back to this when we're ready. We had surges. We thought we were fine. And then everything shut down again. So it was really fun starting a business during all that.
Yeah, totally. So when did you decide to start roasting?
I mean, I think, well, in our original business plan, we knew we always want to roast, but we thought the context of roasting would be to supply coffee for our cafe in like for the neighborhood. So it was always written in there, but I think it was actually this article written by Andy Crouch. It was called Welcome to the Ice Age. And he like wrote it like the first weekend the pandemic happened. And it was essentially some people think that this might be like a bad storm and like it might change our weekend or it might affect us for a month. But as an entrepreneur, like you have to consider this could be an ice age. Like this could be the moment where everything changes, which it was. And so meeting with my co-founders, I shared that article and I just said, it's worth considering. Should we pivot what we think this business is? And at the time, the pivot was, let's start a coffee club. So we started a coffee subscription service for our local community. We shipped as well, but the focus was, this was like when people were still like putting their groceries in a bag and like leaving the bag outside the door for a day.
Yep.
So I would just like drive around the West End and like throw coffee at people's mailboxes, which, surprisingly has a strong retention rate. A lot of those neighbors are still patrons of the shop and part of our coffee club. But so that was the original pivot, was the coffee subscription service. A lot of downsides about the pandemic, but one of the upsides was there was a lot of unstructured time available. So I just sat in this office a lot and learned what Shopify was, learned basics of e-com. We were able to participate in a couple of like business accelerators. One, like we worked with Google for Startups and they were a great resource in helping us build out the foundations of what ecom could look like. And so that really accelerated our growth. That alongside this idea of digital hospitality, like what does it look like to connect with folks digitally when we couldn't physically? Things kind of accelerated that pivot into being primarily a roasting company.
Is there anything that you took from that season where that was the only option that you still lean on today and still utilize today?
Horst Schultz, he has this really good book called Excellence Wins. He was like the longtime CEO of the Ritz-Carlton. He has this, I forgot the exact phrasing of it, but basically this philosophy of surprise and delight. So if you ever do stay at a Ritz, every employee has permission to charm, wow, delight customers. That was something that like we tried to engage in the pandemic. Khalid, our director of operations, who deals with like a lot of customer service issues, like that's the primary context. Where it's like, hey, how can we go above and beyond to, if we make a mistake, like how can we make sure that we double down on correcting it? So that's something that kind of stuck out. Or whether it's expediting shipping, reshipping, like just trying as much as possible to go out of our way to deliver on that promise or expectation customers have.
Especially in the digital environment, it's so easy to be impersonal. I recently found a better shipping option to the tune of like $5 cheaper shipping for the books that I'm sending. I sent two individuals. I sent them like a refund because I literally found this week, and both of them responded to the email and were like, "Thank you. I can't believe you would give us a refund. It's $5, right? It's not going to change anybody's life. It's not going to send their kid to college, but those little things that you can do really do make a difference." And I'll say this: whenever I send a follow-up email to folks that have purchased a book, the response rate is like maybe 1%. And the response rate on those emails was 100%. So it matters.
Yeah. Or like just real quick, funny story. I'm on Reddit. Some of our team's on Reddit. And someone posted on Reddit this story of like, Stankonia coffee, and it was attacked by a squirrel. So it looked like a wild animal like destroyed the mailer. And they're like, "Oh man, I'm so bummed." The question was like, do you guys ever have squirrels attack your coffee? Somehow Khalid saw the order number like on the mailer, And so he like reshipped them coffee and like sent them a note. And then, because of like the digital hospitality, like that's what we do. And then he posted another post being like, story update, look what happened. And so it's just like a cool, it's kind of what you're saying. It's like, no, people, it really matters.
It does.
Obviously, we don't always get it right, but it's just
Of
really
course.
cool to have wins like that.
And there's opportunities you miss all the time, but the ones that you are able to capitalize on, it makes a lot of sense to do that and to give your team the freedom to spend the $8 to ship the bag and the coffee and the packaging that it's going to cost you. It's worth it.
Yep. Yeah, every time.
Last year around this time, you were in Junto, which is an owner's cohort for owners of coffee roasting companies. And one of the first things I recognized about you and your approach to work is you're not hurried. You're very slow, you're very steady and strategic. Where did you learn this approach from?
Trial and error. I think as I grow older, I realize I think in my household growing up, things may probably moved at a slower pace than I realized. But I think in starting a business, the nature of it is just like the house is on fire. You just, part of building a foundation for a business, there are exceptions to this rule, but like as the operator, like your job is just I call myself a handyman or a fireman. It's like fixing a pipe, responding to a flood, putting out a fire, could be a literal fire or like a HR issue. And so it doesn't feel like you have much agency a lot of times when you're starting a business. And so as there came opportunities to have agency and decision making on what kind of business do we take on or not, I think that was a moment of inflection where as operators, like, oh wait, like we can do this, but why? Like, is this a positive contribution, not just to our bottom line, but to our team culture, to our community, to ourselves individually? And I think probably the foundational book that helped like kind of cement the pace in which I work was this book called Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. And he basically just talks about 3 ideas: working at a natural pace, doing fewer things, and obsessing over quality. And I think at Portrait, those are things like those are values we've adopted over the last 2 years, where we're not going to take on everything. We're not going to run at 80 miles an hour. And when we do something, we're going to try and do it well. Even in managing my team, just because I operate at a certain pace doesn't mean everyone has to. And so with my managers, like that's a pretty intentional question I try and ask is like, what is your speedometer? Where should you live? And like, where are you right now? And a lot of times that's like a really good assessment for us internally to figure out like things seem out of control. Why? And it's wait, let me check in with myself first.
How have you seen your team respond to how you're approaching work? Because that's not normal in really any work environment. Typically it's turn and burn, like as fast as you can get this thing out the door. Our margin is shrinking every moment it's taking us to produce a product. So how has your team responded to you as you've sort of welcomed them into an environment where we're working at a natural pace and we are obsessing over quality? How have they responded to that?
Work should be seasonal in the sense that, if we take a look at farming, it's like people don't farm 365 days a year. Like there's seasons of tilling and caring for the land, and there's seasons of bearing the fruit of the land, right? We're not doing the same thing all the time. And so I had some people that they got it, and they, if March is a down month, they like book their vacation for March, which is kind of the idea is like, hey, like let's go hard like these months. And like, let's take these months to rest, recuperate, recover, and figure out what's next. I have some team members that are wired to go. And I think that invites an opportunity to dig a little deeper and ask like, hey, what's the strategy behind this? Like, why? Like what's the impact of releasing 4 coffees versus 2 coffees this month? What's the impact of doing 6 events versus 3 events this month? Like, does doing fewer things allow us to really sweat the details and make sure we nail it? Does taking an extra week allow us to make sure that all the materials are printed right and our copy is looking great for email. One thing Cal Newport talks about, and it's like, it's pretty challenging at first to process, but I think he recommends like taking twice as long as you think for a project timeline. So in the past, we used to say, oh, we think we could get this done or like out the door in 4 weeks. But now we just say, okay, well, if we think it's going to take 4 weeks, let's just book it for 8. And then that way we're not like, we're not cramming. And again, like we don't always get it right. Like we have a project we're going to release next week. The timeline kind of got crunched because we were supposed to start it probably at the beginning of December. And because of the holidays, it's like we kind of started at the end of December.
Yeah.
But it's, it's a learning. So it's not perfect.
Okay. So counter argument, things take as long as you give them. How do you keep your projects from, if it was going to take you 4 weeks and it takes you 4 weeks in one day, right? Because things are never going to be perfect in terms of what you plan for and what the actual outcome is. So how do you keep an 8-week project turning into a 12-week project that could have been a 4-week project?
At Portrait, we talk about anchors a lot. So we already have our anchors set through the year. Like it's about every 2 months we're doing a project. Like that's our pace for the year. It really should be like cumulative. There's some things that, like if we know that we need to work on like 4 different designs for projects, there's nothing inhibiting us from right now. And we're talking in February. There's no problem with saying to a designer, hey, we're thinking about this for Mother's Day. Can you go ahead and get this started? Because that allows us to work at a natural pace where I'm not having to frantically check in with him next week and say, hey, how's that going? It can be a text of being like, hey, look, I saw this inspo over here. Just wanted to like give you that feedback as we think about that project. Or same thing for like, he signed a commitment with our designer for a project we're releasing in September. I did that in January. 1, because it's extremely important that we get it done. But like 2, I knew by doing that, that's going to allow me to work at a natural pace with the designer where he's going to get the best version of me, giving him feedback, inspiration, ideas, all of that over the next few months. Like we're not even committed to working officially until May, but it's like, let's just get this done. So that's kind of the idea of like, obviously we will enter a season of sprinting, but what I'm kind of getting at is, well, if we're sprinting, but we're well-conditioned athletes, then it's just a normal workout.
Right.
So that's kind of the idea there.
I really appreciate that, because if you're working at a natural pace and if you push things out further, you're not procrastinating. You're saying, yeah, this project is due in September, but we can get it done by May, and then you can take on more work, or take a break and go for a little bit of rest. You mentioned earlier that you have a couple co-founders. I've worked in businesses with multiple owners. I've worked in a handful of businesses with multiple owners, and there's always challenges with managing personalities and who's deciding what. How do you look at that in order to maintain a cohesive decision making and then also cohesion over leadership?
For us, leading out with like trust, clarity, and boundaries. So I think early on with anything, it takes time to build trust. And it also takes time to figure out what your boundaries are when it comes to those relationships. But I think kind of like what the North Star for both those things is speaking with clarity. I am day-to-day operators. We all came to the table with very unique experiences and backgrounds. And so, I had blind spots of like, what does fundraising look like? What does it look like to like maximize networking? Like, what does it look like to galvanized community? Like those are all blind spots or areas where I needed to learn to grow more in. What I did understand pretty well was coffee, or like a strength was like being deeply curious about, oh, we need to start roasting coffee. Let's talk to this person. Let's talk to that person. Let's look at this roaster. I think we've realized there's seasons for everything. Up until this point, building like a foundation for Portrait to grow off of has been our point of focus and attention. And that's been a season where like I've been able to lead out, and I'm sure there'll be upcoming seasons where me focus on maintaining a foundation and the vision of growing a company. Like maybe there's some friction there and maybe another leader will step in and help support, So I think just being open-minded to that idea of businesses go through seasons just like we do.
I like how you framed it with trust, clarity, and boundaries as the primary drivers, but then also an acknowledgement of each of your individual unique giftings and your ability to know what are you actually not good at and where do we need to tap on somebody else here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think acknowledging your weaknesses is it's kind of like I think earlier in starting portrait, I would like suffer in silence, which is like I
Right.
wouldn't be honest about things that were I was drowning in or that were major stressors. And it was like it wasn't anyone's fault but myself because I wasn't speaking up and saying, "Oh, you know, this is a problem."
Yeah.
So I've learned to just like pick up the phone and be like, "Hey." Like it's and a lot of times it might not be a specific issue. It might be like, hey, can we catch up? Because I need to process this thing with another their founder.
So many challenges, specifically with owner relationships, are avoided by doing exactly what you're talking about. Hey, we just need to get both of our heads on the same page, or all three of our brains on the same page, and understand what's happening here. And oftentimes owners don't want to do that for the very reasons you mentioned of, well, I don't want to be the weak link here. And that's not how you're going to be perceived. If you have partners that actually want what's best for you and for the business, they're going to say, yeah, we got your back.
Yeah.
So your company name is more than a nice name. It's an ode to your ancestors. It's a reminder of where coffee was found and discovered, and really a polemic against the status quo of the industry. So what does it mean for a coffee business to reflect the people who grow it and the neighborhoods it serves?
Yeah. That's a big question that I think we're trying to chip away at. Our mission is to pour a new narrative in the world of specialty coffee. I think we want to highlight the entire supply chain of people of color, specifically Black people, that are doing incredible work. So throughout, not just the history of America, but of our world, I believe that people have just been cropped out. People of color have been cropped out of those pictures and in those stories. And so whether it's locally in our community, highlighting Lottie Watkins, who it was her family still owns and operates our building, but she was the first Black woman to own and operate a real estate company here in Atlanta, and her
Wow.
family still honors that legacy. So
Yeah.
whether it's highlighting that story or highlighting stories of our producer, of our community, like that's our aim, that's our focus, or like highlighting other Black owned coffee companies and roasters. We want to just show people how big the world really is. When we do a project or tell a new story, we look at it as an opportunity to highlight all of those aspects.
Yeah. It's beautiful and necessary, and something that in a largely white industry, it's easy for us to not acknowledge. Where did coffee come from? Who are the Black and brown bodies that have been responsible for this thing we get to enjoy every day? And how are we acknowledging them? I interact with owners and leaders in coffee. I don't want to say all the time, but I do interact with them where they will intellectually understand the need to create space for folks that don't look like me in coffee. And often the response is, well, coffee is just mostly white, and that's just how the industry is. There's not much I can do about it. What would you say to someone who said that?
I mean, one, I wouldn't be surprised, but two, it's hard to understand the urgency around creating a space for yourself if the world's always catered to you, right? Which is like the whole problem is you can't understand the idea of being other because the world has been created for you, So it's like in some sense it's like I can't explain that. I can't like it's kind of I always tell people I assume you're going to be speaking there, but the World of Coffee event is in April in San Diego. And so I think me and a few team members are going, and it's always fun, but it's also like you walk into an expo room with thousands of people and still in an environment that is extremely diverse, that is supposed to reflect the world of coffee. It's still extremely predominantly white. Yeah. So it's like, it's shocking, overwhelming, right? So I think constantly, I grew up in a predominantly white community. I never felt like there was a space for me to exist as a young Black man growing up. And as I got to spend more time as a young adult, like with my friends and my now family and my in-laws and spending time down here is like, oh man, we really need, and I was already working coffee. It's like, we need a coffee shop, a third space that exists for us to be ourselves, to display our art, play our music, have our conversations in a space that is safe, where we don't, I don't have to hold my tongue. I can like say how I feel. Right. So that's really the energy there. And then too, it's like, if you don't understand that, or you can't acknowledge the significance of that, then like you don't need to be in the space.
Yeah.
That's why we're creating our
Yeah.
own spaces now,
Yeah.
and everyone is welcome, right? But like, I just told you, like, that's what kind of time we're on with that,
Yeah. I think that's a good response. And yeah, if the world that you live in, if you're not acknowledging who it was built for, then it's going to be very difficult for you to understand the realities of your responsibility in it and your responsibility to do something other than the status quo. When I was managing a cafe and I was responsible for hiring, and the intention is to be inclusive, right? To hire people that of all backgrounds and, races and experiences in life. So I just remember at that point, I was like, well, I don't understand why people of color aren't necessarily applying. And I couldn't understand, and my response at that point was, well, I can't hire them if they're not applying. And the reality is, the spaces that I was in, I wasn't open to those types of relationships. And it's much easier to hire people if you actually know them and are interacting in spaces that people that don't look like you are interacting in. And so
Yeah,
it's a journey.
exactly what you just said. It's like, no, I have plenty of Black people applied to work at Portrait. Like, it's like
Yeah.
largely predominantly Black, but it's
Yeah.
exactly what you just said. It's like, oh, cool. People see themselves here. They can imagine the idea of having a job here, and then they therefore apply.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
it's as simple as that.
Yeah. It's important to think about, and it's important to take action to change your environment. If you have power in the situation, power in the hiring decisions and how the space is created, and it's our responsibility as the folks that hold the power to create those spaces for folks that don't look like me. And so, yeah, thanks for sharing that. Okay, so you recently did a collaboration with Outkast for their 25th anniversary of Stankonia. What a great collab. I was listening to it the whole time I was preparing for this, and amazing record. So many amazing tracks on it. Tell us about the collab first.
They're all pieces that are individually sold on our website. We were honored and kind of shocked to have the opportunity, but as Outkast's team was thinking about how to celebrate the anniversary, they wanted to work with small businesses, local businesses that reflected the culture of Outkast, which is deeply rooted in Atlanta. And so they reached out and kind of asked, like, hey, if we were to do this, like, what would y'all... They just asked for a proposal, and their team was super jazzed about it. And they were really, really cool collaborators. And it was really, really fun process. It kind of just like really opened our eyes to how large of an opportunity there is in the world of coffee, of telling, like, I've talked about telling stories a lot, but a much broader idea of what it looks like to integrate a coffee into your everyday life. It like meet moments of history too, which is kind of crazy.
Owners get approached with collab opportunities all the time. How did this one come to be?
A cold email.
A cold email from the Outkast team?
That is what happened. Yeah.
Unreal.
I didn't think it was real. I asked another team member to field it to figure out what was going on. Just because it was like, I mean, like, who would ever imagine that? And yeah, so Marcus took the call and like had a couple conversations and was like, oh no, this is kind of real. And so we kind of went from there.
Talking about what things to say no to and doing less things and working at a reasonable pace and caring about quality on the things that you do say yes to. How do you determine what collabs make sense and what ones you say no to?
That's a good question. I was having some conversations with some of our coffee importers yesterday, talking about a different version of this. Like, how do you say yes or no to a coffee? And it is like it's a bit of science and it's a bit of art, because there is no, like, it's like we have to embrace that we're inconsistent at times. I don't have a perfect methodology, but I think when something like an opportunity like Outkast is presented on the table for our team internally, it's like, the first step is like scoping, figuring out like, what is this going to take? not just financially, but time. We all have other responsibilities. And so this is going to take up a significant portion of our time, effort, energy at work. So I think we had to like really carve and be realistic and say like, in order to do this in excellence, which is a core value for us, we say excellence wins. It's like we're going to have to say no to all of these things. There's other seasons like right now for the first half of the year, we have a bit more flexibility in saying yes because we don't have a large scale campaign. And I think too, what we've realized in saying yes or no, it's a lot easier to say yes to things when the nature of the work we're doing is community based. So there's moments where it's like, hey, no, not right now, but would you be interested in participating in this? Right. So like creating kind of an ecosystem where it's like, oh, we don't have to march alone. We can invite people to do it with us. So like a tangible example of what I'm talking about is for Valentine's Day, we partnered with a local chocolate maker, a local flower artisan, and a local designer to do a project for Valentine's Day. Where it's like, oh, cool, we got to bring in like several people from our community to create something. So I think working at a natural pace, it allows us to think and be like, all right, if we're going to do this, like, how can we make the most of this opportunity and who can we bring along for the ride?
I love that. How can we make the most of it and who can we bring along? That is so good. I also loved it that you're willing to go back to somebody and say, hey, this just doesn't work for us now, but we want to work with you in the future, just not right now. Because oftentimes when I talk to owners, the response is, oh, I don't want to say no to this because this might be the last opportunity that comes up. And I feel like I'm constantly coaching owners to say, opportunity is a river flowing just at the bottom of the hill. And you got to go down there and ladle out a little bit every once in a while. But that's not the last opportunity you're ever going to have. And so thanks for reminding us of that.
Yeah, I think even what you just said, like we learned kind of not the hard way, but in 2021, we had such an influx of interest in partnership. And I had to say no, or I had to be like, not right now. Can we like check back in 6 months? And some of those relationships that we waited on till the right time are still today some of the most fruitful ones we have. I do think in large part because like there was a level of honesty around like, hey, I think at this point we can really make this work.
Sure. We're going back to what you were talking about earlier about one, knowing yourself, but then also knowing your bandwidth as a company and as a team. And that's really important to understand. Yeah, we're just not at a place where we can tackle 10 projects, but maybe 2. You mentioned that there's a significant opportunity with these types of partnerships, specifically like the one that you did with Outcast, or doing with Outcast. How could someone develop a similar type relationship and partnership or collab and capitalize on the opportunity?
Great question. I mean, for us, like paid marketing has been huge. I know it can be kind of like a nebulous thing, but with a story like that, again, the question was like, hey, how can we make the most of this opportunity? So along with doing like organic, we did marketing activations in Atlanta last fall around the event. But the reality is like there's like what 300 million people in the United States, or 300 million plus. So there's a ton of people who don't live here in Atlanta that love Outkast, that love coffee. And
Totally.
so I think like, yeah. I mean, like literally just like plugging that in to your marketing channels, there's like a bit of building and tinkering that goes in there. But like, that's really the idea, right? Like, and it could apply to any kind of community or specific story like that, like I know Verve Coffee, they did a collab with Grateful Dead, which is a really unique, cool story. I don't really relate to their music like that, but it was a point of inspiration, being like, damn, like that's really cool. Like, let me go on Spotify and check out what this is about. So I think creating like branding or assets that are compelling as well, like visually. We sadly live in a society where it's like you have 5 seconds to capture someone's attention.
Right.
And I think this project has been a really good reminder of that, because like, the bag is pretty colorful and fun. And it's like, that's the first point of feedback we get from folks. Hey, and there is some psychology there, right? Where you're like, you look at something, it looks great, and you're kind of priming people to be like, 100%. Well, if it looks this great, I'm sure it tastes good too, nice. Right? Yeah. Which is, it's kind of funny, but it is real.
Yeah. You taste it with your eyes first.
Yeah.
You and I have talked a fair amount about pricing and how to structure pricing. How is your approach to pricing both wholesale and retail evolved over the last few years?
How has it evolved? There's been a growing level of honesty with myself and
Mm-hmm.
with my team, just because we have lived in quite a chaotic time of supply chain, whether it's tariffs or pressure on the market due to climate change or bad harvest, whatever the case might be. The margins in which we started Portrait and the margins that exist today are just not the same. And so I think it becomes ever increasingly important to ask oneself, okay, we have this relationship. It's a ton of revenue, but like, does it create a lot of impact? And we all measure impact differently. But, if my team is coming to me and saying, Aaron, we spend 5 hours a day, you know, working on this account, it's a time suck, it's an energy suck. Then I look at the numbers and like the margins aren't even good. Then it begs the question of like, why are we doing this? Sometimes it's like, hey, this is a necessary problem in the short term to help alleviate some of the weight of our expenses. But like, over time, it is a real conversation where it's like, hey, like, let's cut back from that. Like if this isn't a positive contribution, let's take a couple steps back and focus on some of these campaigns, or let's reinvest some of that cash flow into leveling up our branding or experiential marketing, whatever it might be. Yeah. So it's taking time to be really honest about what those margins are, and then allow those to guide our decision making.
You opened the conversation talking about the build out going from 100,000 to 300 in just a few months. And it's just a reality that the longer you're in business, things will probably cost more tomorrow than they did today. And you have to be constantly evaluating that. So I love how you broke it down of honesty, impact. I don't think you said evaluation, but I picked up that you were saying evaluate what you're doing and is it actually making sense still? And then allocation of resources. I think that's a really great framework for approaching pricing. We talked a little bit about using AI to price coffee as well, and I've toyed with it as well. So I'm just curious, what have you learned as you've tried to use AI as a part of helping you price your coffee?
So in our business cohort that you led last year, you gave us a really handy dandy pricing calculator that took the full cost of operating a business and broke it down into cost per unit, essentially, which is a really cool tool. So my thought was, okay, maybe we could take parts of this tool, create really specific questions, upload specific data, and then it could give me outputs. So I built something. I mean, and this is why I don't think we're having as quick of a transition as you might see in the news. Like, it would just create ghost numbers. So if I said, if the calculation was that our labor per pound was like, say 147,
Mm-hmm.
it might change it to 225, or if I'm saying our green coffee cost on this coffee is $5.25, it might change it to $6 out of nowhere. Obviously, this is an exercise of precision.
Yeah.
Where every penny does matter.
Yeah.
Relatively unsuccessful.
Yeah. It's interesting because I experienced the exact same thing. So I built this tool and I've used it for about 7 years and I've been constantly honing it. Now it's got a couple hundred hours into it of my time. And I was like, I'm sure I can just take the concept and put it into ChatGPT or Claude, and it can find improvements and can make it better than what it already is. And it did the exact same thing to me. And so I'm obviously not against using AI in certain circumstances. There's an argument to be made against, the ethical reasons of water consumption and all that stuff. But I think it's important to be conscious of it. You have to know your numbers inside and out before you have an AI or even another person manage your pricing and develop pricing for you. Because if you don't, they can come up with ghost numbers, hallucinations. And if you're not familiar with it, it's going to give you the wrong information, which is a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And two, I think in the past, an exercise I did all the time was, parallel play of asking like friends, like, hey, what are you guys charging for, like a 5-pound bag of coffee? And it's like, I mean, sure, on some level, it's helpful to understand where the market's at, but the market doesn't always dictate your costs either, right? So that's been a huge point of emphasis for me of being like, well, I know what this person's doing here and here, but what's actually going to drive, again, positive contribution for our business? And those are the numbers I need to be focused on.
We need to circle that and highlight that and put it in italics and bold, because that's the thing. You have to understand, what do you need to make off of this pound of coffee so that you don't lose your shirt. And if you don't understand that, then you're jeopardizing yourself. If you're pricing, I call it up the street pricing. If you're pricing your coffee based off of the roaster up the street or your buddy or that's in the next town, that's a recipe for hard times, in my opinion.
Or two, like what we just went through, this past year with, I guess, green coffee was 50% more expensive, 12 months ago than it is today as we're talking. So all roasters had to take on some level of cost increase. And, I think now we're all looking back at last year being like, whoa, these numbers are, you know what I mean? Like drastically different. Now you're entering a new year in a new market. And it's like, how are you planning on splitting the difference or adjusting pricing? You're kind of shooting at a target that's constantly moving, and kind of what you're saying. If you don't understand your costs and your expenses, then you'll never have a shot,
Yeah. It's unfortunate. Okay,
Yeah.
so you've mentioned a bunch of books already and things that you learned from and approaches that you sort of have picked up along the way. Do you have a daily information diet?
No, I have a 2 and 4-year-old. Which is just saying, like, I used to. I think, again, I was talking earlier about seasonality and just like embracing what life gives you. So I am just now getting back to a season where, yes, I can carry around my Kindle in my pocket. And if I can grab 10 minutes, I will. I mean, sure, like I'm being a little facetious. Like I love reading the Morning Brew newsletter. It's just like a holistic overview of what's going on in the economy, politics, like local and global. It just gives you a quick overview of like what's going on and how that might affect the world of business. I have other Substacks and newsletters I read, but yeah, as far as like deeper learning, there's seasons where I get to read a ton. I get to like pick up the phone and ask other people what's going on and what's energizing them. I have other seasons where I don't get to sleep at night,
Totally.
because of kids or whatever. Again, like that idea of working at a national pace, like that has to apply to my learning as well. So yeah, but I have made a habit of, if I can carry my Kindle around with me and I do have a dead 10 minutes, I could do like 10 minutes of micro learning instead of scrolling on my phone. Obviously I scroll too, but that's kind of been a big help.
I love that.
And then too, I mean, even to plug what you have going on, like I think being a part of your cohort and stuff was super helpful, because I was telling someone I tend to believe I'm much more disciplined than I actually am. So having forced accountability of like, okay, I'm in this small group of people and we're meeting at this time, and I know if I'm not there, like they're gonna know. Like I think whether, I've been taking swim lessons or being a part of a cohort or whatever, I've learned from myself at a pressure test of accountability is huge.
Yeah. We need each other.
Yeah.
And not to make each other feel bad. Not to shame each other, but to just be like, yeah, we're doing a thing together.
Yeah, for sure.
It's good. You mentioned that in your trip in Rwanda, you had been inspired to create more joy in this industry, something of more enjoyment, I should say. What's bringing you joy in your work 6-7 years later?
Definitely supply chain. It is an uphill battle, right? Like you have to source all these coffees that fit in all these different slots, and you have to make it work to actually, not just take care of the producers, but also take care of your team and like keep the business afloat. Where in the past, maybe we didn't have as much flexibility in lots that we were buying and projects that we're supporting. We're getting to a place slowly where it's like, oh man, like, okay, we have this slot coming up this July. What are the priorities in buying this coffee? Is it working with this producer? Is it hitting this target margin?
Yeah.
Is it both? Is it shifting business this way? So that's really fun and energizing to be able to have an opportunity to actually engage in direct trade, being on the phone, talking to producers, understanding exactly what challenges they're going through and potentially how we can support. So that's been really fun.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that answer. And it's a good place to land here. We usually end the podcast by sharing one or two books. You've already mentioned two so far, but is there any other books that have been particularly formative for you on your journey as a person or as an owner?
Definitely Slow Productivity, which I already shouted out, by Cal Newport. And then the latest book that like really blew my mind was called Smart Brevity. It's by the co-founders of Axios, the news source, and it's a writing framework for just very quickly communicating a big idea, why it matters, and a deep dive. And I think that's really important in the context of coffee, because I think we get caught up in like a word salad a lot of times when we talk. Like I think a lot of people just don't know how to talk about coffee to people that aren't in our industry. And so I found a lot of clarity in that framework, because it's a very quick way of being like, okay, what's a geisha? What makes it important? What can you taste? And for most people, like that's the level of clarity they need. So definitely recommend that book.
I think it's so important, as you mentioned earlier, related to, we have 5 seconds to catch people's attention. And I'm learning this too. The ideas that I'm communicating, I have to get more succinct. I have to become more clear in a shorter amount of time, because the attention span that individuals have now is so short. And I pushed against it for a while because I was like, well, it's not my job to water it down for somebody. But the reality is it makes you better when you can, like you said, quickly articulate, what is a geisha? Why is it different? What does it taste like? Should they pay $40, $50 for a 12-ounce bag? How do you say that in less than 30 seconds?
And that's the trick in it. And that requires a certain level of processing, like you processing the information, and kind of what you're saying, you taking the responsibility of like, okay, like let me actually think about why this matters. And for us too, that has created a framework of simplicity in how we buy coffees too. And I've started sharing with our partners of like, hey, like if it's not really clear what value we're going to bring to customers by bringing on this coffee, then we're not going to buy it. So even for us, right? Like, and that framework doesn't fit for everyone's coffee buying philosophy, but there's some coffees that I taste that I'm like, okay, how did you guys do this? And if I can't clearly like communicate that backwards or like forward to my customers, then it's like not in this season.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. That's so good all the way around. Aaron, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, inspiring us with the things that are bringing you joy, and sharing about the way that you have your ownership structured, and also for reminding us to remember our values in all of the decisions we make, whether it's a collaboration or whether it's leading our team or the way that we're buying coffee. It's really, really important. So thank you for reminding us of that, and thank you for being here. How do people get in touch with you if they want to do a collab or buy coffee?
If they want to do a collab, my Instagram handle is Fender AA. Portrait Coffees is just Portrait Coffee. We have a contact us page on our website. I'm also active on LinkedIn, and we can connect there as well.
Very cool. We'll link to all those in the show notes. As always, be well. It's Luke again. I'm back one last time with 2 questions. Number 1, did you learn anything from that conversation? Number 2, did you make a new connection, or perhaps there's a new question as a result of that conversation? If either of those 2 things are true, I'd love to hear about it. Go to my website, PomeloCoffeeConsulting.com, hit the contact tab. There's a form down there. I'd love to hear what connections you made, what questions were answered, or what new questions you might have. Let's chat about it. As always, be well.